Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Listening to the ratepayers, I'm not a member of this select committee, but I did happen to sit for a full day in Auckland and listen to the submissions made by those people who came before us. Overwhelming, Mr. Speaker, overwhelming opposition to this bill. 414 submissions to this bill, more than 80% of them opposing it. And that was from 36 opposed by councils and a huge number from local community boards. If that member's really serious about listening to ratepayers, she should start perhaps listening to the councils and the local boards that have been elected by the ratepayers and what they think about this bill, because they don't want it. And that includes, Mr. Speaker, that includes the Mayor of Auckland, who came before us and spoke out against all the provisions in this piece of legislation, including the idea that we need to have a pre-election report. And when we asked him what we needed this pre-election report for, and how much it was going to cost, he, along with other councils, said that they were probably going to have to devote 1 or 2 extra people at least in their council to be able to put this together. This is going to increase red tape. It's going to increase the amount of bureaucracy, administrative costs in this bill. We're sitting here today in urgency. I'm standing. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. I'm standing in urgency once again, talking about local government or a bill about Auckland. 3 out of the 4 local government or super city pieces of legislation, Mr. Speaker, have been taken here and brought in under urgency. It's kind of a paradox that we come in here to do this under urgency, and we are talking about more transparency, more democracy, more ability for people out there to have a say. This piece of legislation removes a lot of the consultation. Now, it's interesting that some of the people that came to see before us believed that some of the consultation should have been streamlined. But the key aspect of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is it removes the obligation to consult, particularly when there is going to be some ability to privatise or certainly put something into the influence of a CCO. It also, as a number of speakers have talked about, is it means that that water can be effectively privatised, taken from a 15 to a 35-year-old lease under this piece of legislation, which is effectively privatisation. Think about that. 35 years is half a lifetime, nearly 2 generations. And Mr. Speaker, I have to say, I am open to discuss this. I am open to looking at the evidence that this is going to make our water more accessible, higher quality and cheaper for people. But I haven't seen the evidence, and as Sue Kesley's pointed out this evening, it's actually made all around the world water more expensive, poorer quality, and less available to people. The evidence is overwhelming. Why are we trying to do it here? Mr. Speaker, I can only suggest that this is part of an ideology that is being pushed through this legislation. It's not a bill, it's not a plan, it's not a piece of legislation. This government doesn't have a plan, it doesn't have a strategy. It's a piece of ideology being shoved through without any real evidence or any analysis. It's focused obviously on funding, and again, there's not one person on this side of the House that would say that increasing funding, increasing rates is necessarily a good thing. But there's the Local Government Commission pointed out to us in their submissions. Actually, overall, and according to in relation to GDP, rates haven't actually gone up that excessive. That is the evidence, and this, Mr. Speaker, comes back to my key point: is let's put legislation through with evidence to support it, with the right sort of backup, with the right sort of analysis. maybe with a semblance of a strategy or a plan, but no plan, no strategy, no analysis, no evidence, and overwhelming of opposition from local people who have actually been elected into local government telling us what to do. That point raises a very interesting question. How is, and I'm talking about Auckland here in particular, Mr. Speaker, how is our local body politicians going to interact with the national government in this case, and with national government? And we come to in this particular bill, Mr. Speaker, which talks about transport. This is one of the core services that comes under this bill. And let me give you one example of this, Mr. Speaker. Under the Labor government, we took enormous steps to improve rail transport in Auckland. And Mr. Joyce has made it his business to turn up to every railway station opening throughout the... He didn't even have the imagination to put into place. Didn't have the imagination to put into place. What he has got the imagination to do, Mr. Speaker, he has the imagination to run a brand new highway up to Warkworth inside the new Auckland boundaries, part of the new super city, so that his mates have a better access to the beaches up in Omaha. This is a travesty. You will be spending nearly $2 billion, Mr. Speaker, nearly $2 billion, and you will be received, for every dollar that you spend on this highway, Mr. Speaker, less than $1 will be returned. Mr. Speaker, I apologise. I get carried away, just like Sir Roger Douglas did earlier on, but I won't stoop to what he called you in that outbreak. This will mean that the real opportunities for infrastructure development under Clause 5, the real core services, the inner city loop, are threatened in terms of being implemented. This is going to make an enormous difference to Auckland. Railway patronage in Auckland has doubled in 5 years, and when it becomes electrified, something again the Labor government brought into being, when the railway is electrified, we're going to see a massive spike once again in patronage. It's not going to be able to cope with it, and we do need an inner city loop. And Mr. Speaker, there's been a lot of talk. Len Brown, who has actually supported this, along with John Banks, the other mayoral candidate, not yet, good keen man, but not yet. This has been supported by John Banks, by Len Brown, by Christine Fletcher, and a number of other of the Auckland councillors. Now, what is this government saying? Well, actually, we need to think about ways of paying for it. Well, actually, there was a way of paying for it before. It was called the regional... taken away by this government. Why? Because it didn't want local government to have a real say in their own planning. And the Minister of Local Government might want to take a note of this. Why doesn't he get in behind Auckland and support something like a regional fuel tax that might have actually enabled Auckland to get on and fund their own infrastructure programs alongside national government funding? So this, Mr. Speaker, is a narrow, stingy bill that is based on ideology. It's not based on anything but ideology. It's completely unnecessary, as my colleague said. It takes out the obligation for community consultation. It effectively privatises our key assets such as water. It increases the administrative costs in this pre-election report, which will enable our local government to actually cost more rather than less. It is an ideology looking for a strategy and a plan. It is certainly, Mr. Speaker, an unnecessary waste of time at 5... Mr. Speaker.